450 BC, the most well-travelled man in the ancient world stood before a building so vast it left him speechless. He had seen the pyramids. He had walked through the temples of Babylon. He had visited the hanging gardens, the great walls, the wonders of the known world, and he said, without hesitation, that this building surpassed them all. His name was Herodotus. He is considered the father of history, the first person in recorded civilization to systematically document the world around him. And what he described that day was a structure containing 3,000 rooms, half above ground, half carved directly into the earth below it. Corridors so numerous and so complex that even his Egyptian guide refused to lead him through certain sections. Chambers filled with the mummified remains of sacred crocodiles. Walls covered in carvings so detailed and so perfectly executed that he struggled to find words for them. He called it the Labyrinth, and then it vanished. Not slowly, not gradually. It vanished so completely that for 2,000 years historians assumed Herodotus had simply exaggerated, that the labyrinth was a myth, a legend, the overactive imagination of an ancient writer, until 2008, when a team of researchers pointed ground-penetrating radar at a patch of desert in the Fayum region of Egypt and found it. Every single room, every single corridor, all 3,000 of them, sitting exactly where Herodotus said it would be, perfectly preserved, buried under 2 meters of sand, and the Egyptian authorities have not allowed a single stone to be moved since. Today, we're going to talk about what the labyrinth is, what Herodotus saw inside it, what the radar found beneath the sand, and why the most extraordinary archaeological discovery of the 21st century is being completely ignored. To understand the labyrinth, you first need to understand who built it, and that requires going back to a pharaoh most people have never heard of. His name was Amenemhat III. He ruled Egypt during the 12th dynasty, around 1860 BC. By most measures, he was one of the most powerful pharaohs in Egyptian history. He oversaw a period of extraordinary prosperity. He redirected the Nile. He built an entire artificial lake, Lake Meris, covering hundreds of square miles, engineered to regulate the annual flood cycle of the Nile and guarantee harvest for millions of people. An artificial lake, covering hundreds of square miles, built in 1860 BC, with copper tools and rope. That lake still exists today. It is now called Lake Karun, and adjacent to it, on a flat desert plain in the Fayum region, 80 kilometers southwest of Cairo, Amenemhat III built the labyrinth, not as a palace, not as a temple, not as a tomb. According to the ancient texts, the labyrinth served as an administrative center for all of Egypt, a place where the governors of every nome, every province, would gather to conduct the business of the empire. Each of Egypt's 42 provinces had its own dedicated courtyard within the complex, 42 separate open-air courts, each with its own entrance, its own colonnaded walkway, its own administrative chambers, and all of them connected by a network of underground passages that extended deep beneath the desert floor. Now let's talk about what Herodotus actually saw, because his account is one of the most detailed descriptions of any ancient structure ever written, and it has been largely ignored by mainstream archaeology for reasons that, as we will get to, are not entirely academic. Herodotus arrived at the labyrinth sometime around 450 BC, approximately 1,400 years after it was built. He spent multiple days there. He was given a guided tour of the above-ground sections, and he was specifically denied access to the underground sections. His Egyptian guides told him the underground chambers contained the tombs of the kings who built the labyrinth and the sacred crocodiles. They would not allow a foreigner to enter. What Herodotus described above ground was staggering enough. 12 covered courts arranged in a row, 6 facing north and 6 facing south. A single roof covering the entire complex. Chambers of white stone, polished so finely they appeared to glow. Colonnaded walkways connecting every section, the columns carved from single blocks of stone, each one perfectly proportioned. Walls covered in reliefs depicting scenes Herodotus had never seen anywhere else in Egypt. Images that his guides refused to explain. Figures that did not match any pharaoh or deity he recognized. He wrote, and this is a direct paraphrase of his account, that the complexity of the passages above ground was already almost beyond belief, but that what lay beneath was, according to his guides, even greater. He estimated the total floor area of the above-ground section alone at roughly 70,000 square meters. For context, that is larger than the entire temple complex at Karnak, larger than any structure built in Europe for another 2,000 years, and it was just the top half. The underground section is where things become truly extraordinary. Ancient sources beyond Herodotus also describe the labyrinth. Strabo, the Greek geographer, visited around 25 BC and confirmed everything Herodotus had written. Pliny the Elder wrote about it in 77 AD, describing the underground section in particular detail. He described chambers so vast that the doors, made from solid slabs of syenite granite, created a sound when opened that Pliny compared to thunder. The grinding of 20-ton granite doors on stone pivots, echoing through underground corridors, sounding like distant thunder. Think about what it takes to engineer a door that weighs 20 tons and still swings open. Pliny also described something else, something that has never been adequately explained. He described a central hall, deep underground, where the ceiling was a single slab of stone, one piece. The entire ceiling of a room large enough to hold hundreds of people, a single stone ceiling. In a room carved 20 meters below the desert floor. No one has ever explained how that stone was cut, transported, and placed. No modern engineer has proposed a credible method. It simply should not be possible. And yet 3 separate ancient writers described it. Now let's talk about what happened to it, because the labyrinth did not fall. It did not collapse into ruin over centuries. It did not sink into the sand gradually. It was demolished, deliberately, systematically, almost completely, by the Romans, around 30 BC, when Rome took control of Egypt following the death of Cleopatra. The Roman administrators began stripping the labyrinth for building materials. The white limestone casing stones were removed first, then the columns, then the walls. Thousands of years of stone quarried and shaped and fitted with extraordinary precision, reduced to raw material for Roman construction projects across Egypt. Within 200 years of Roman occupation, almost nothing remained above ground, just the foundation platform, and the sand beginning to drift over what was left. By the medieval period, the site had been completely forgotten. The location described by Herodotus, precise enough to identify the Fayum region near the ruins of the ancient city of Crocodilopolis, had simply been abandoned to the desert, and it stayed that way for nearly 2,000 years. until a Belgian-Egyptian research team called the Mataha expedition decided to take Herodotus seriously. In 2008, led by researcher Louis de Cordier, the team arrived at the Hawara site in the Fayum, a location that had been proposed as the likely site of the Labyrinth based on Herodotus's geographic description. They brought ground-penetrating radar, the same technology that had been used at Giza, and what the radar showed them was extraordinary. Beneath approximately 2 meters of sand and rubble, sitting perfectly intact, undisturbed, exactly as the Romans had left it when they stripped the above-ground structure, was the underground section. The foundation platform was clearly visible, and beneath it, the rooms, hundreds of them, arranged in the precise pattern Herodotus had described. 12 main sections, interconnecting corridors, larger chambers at the center, and deep below the main level, the great underground hall, with what appeared on radar to be a single massive ceiling slab directly above it. The team published their findings. They submitted excavation permit applications to the Egyptian Supreme Council of Antiquities. They were denied. They reapplied with additional supporting data. Denied again. They requested permission simply to conduct additional radar surveys. Denied. Louis de Cordier has been trying to get back onto that site for 15 years. The answer is always no. Here is what I want you to sit with. The greatest building in the ancient world, described in extraordinary detail by 3 separate ancient writers across 500 years of history, found by modern radar in 2008, sitting perfectly intact beneath 2 meters of sand, containing, according to ancient sources, underground chambers filled with the records and artifacts of 3,000 years of Egyptian civilization. Chambers that have not been opened since the Romans sealed them 2,000 years ago, sitting in the desert, waiting, and the Egyptian government will not allow a single shovel into the ground. No excavation, no further survey, no explanation. Just silence. You have to ask yourself the same question we asked about the Sphinx, and the same question we asked about the pyramid. Why? What is the consistent thread running through every single one of these sites? Every time modern technology finds something extraordinary beneath the Egyptian desert, the answer is always the same. No, you cannot look, you cannot dig, you cannot know. The pyramids have sealed chambers nobody is allowed to open. The Sphinx sits above radar-confirmed rooms nobody is allowed to enter. And now the greatest building in the ancient world is sitting intact beneath the sand, confirmed by science, documented by history, and nobody is allowed to touch it. At some point, the question stops being about archaeology and starts being about what exactly is being protected, because whatever is in those underground chambers of the labyrinth, whatever is in those rooms that Herodotus was never allowed to enter, whatever made his Egyptian guides refuse to even speak about certain sections, it has been down there for 2,000 years, sealed, silent, waiting for someone to finally ask the right question. Subscribe. Because next week, we cover the ancient map that showed Antarctica completely ice-free, drawn 300 years before any explorer ever reached it, and the cartographer who drew it claimed he was copying from a source that was thousands of years older. I'll see you there.